Hello and welcome to the Theater and Dance Talks. I am Kyle Van Frank and I'm here with dance professor Lawrence Jackson, and we're going to take a little look back at our dance concerts from this semester. So one thing that I noticed and really enjoyed this year and this semester, especially in our dance concerts, was the sheer diversity of the pieces. Just the variety that was presented both in ARDT and Dance Alabama. Would you like to speak a little to that diversity?
Sure. One of the things that we pride ourselves, we as in the dance program pride ourselves in, is the mere fact that we celebrate all disciplines, all genres, all styles of dance, and we illuminate that desire to be diverse within our concerts and the works that we present in our concerts. We certainly celebrate all genres such as jazz and contemporary jazz and classical and neoclassical and contemporary ballet and modern and postmodern and classical modern, and the list goes on. And we one of the reasons why we celebrate those styles is because we certainly believe that our dancers should be versatile in their choreography as well as their ability to be able to morph into any style of dance. We certainly believe that the market calls for that, for dancers to be versatile in this day and age, and so we try to promote that in our program. And so in both ARDT and Dance Alabama, it's always a plethora of diversity because we're a diverse faculty and we are a diverse student body, and so we certainly celebrate those differences in our concerts.
Great. And kind of talking about, as you see that in the concerts, how does that also, that diversity look in the curriculum? How does that tie back into not only what's happening on stage, but in the classroom?
Well, within our curriculum, we require our students to pretty much take all genres of dance at least once, and then after that, they can pretty much direct which area they want to go in, be it ballet, modern, or jazz, or dance, film, and but we certainly expose them to all of them and require them to at least take one of those courses at least once. And in terms of the diversity within those genres, each one of the professors on our faculty have very diverse backgrounds, and so as such they bring that level of diversity into their teaching of whatever genre. And then also just beyond that, within our course curriculum, beyond the studio, within our academic courses such as history, we also take a non-Western approach to teaching history as well. For instance, the history class that I teach is very Afrocentric. We look at history through the Africanist lens, and so we are studying the Eurocentric perspective of history through an Afrocentric perspective. So it's throughout our curriculum, we certainly try to, again, celebrate diversity because we certainly want our curriculum to be a reflection of our mission.
Sure. And as we talk, not only do the students take these classes in performance, but as we see, I mean, our students are given the great opportunity not only to perform but also to choreograph here. So can you talk a little bit, what does choreography as a class, as a curriculum look like both in ARDT and DA as well as outside in the classroom?
Yeah. Well, within our curriculum, students are required to take a choreography 1 class, usually the first semester of their sophomore year. And within that choreography class, they're basically exposed to some of the choreographic devices and principles that surround creating and producing dance work. And so within that class, they get the opportunity to develop their artistic voice choreographically and consistently get feedback from their peers as well as the professor of that particular course. And so throughout the course of the semester of those students taking that class, they're consistently getting critiqued by several of their peers as well as the professor, which then prepares them to be able to understand how to take criticism of their work and to receive and apply some of the criticism to their work should they see it needed. And within Dance Alabama, basically the students submit work and then they are adjudicated by the faculty. So it's kind of that same process that essentially evolves out of the choreography class. So at that point, students are pretty much abreast to knowing how to accept and take criticism.
Sure.
And then they move to the next level where you have the entire faculty that's criticizing them or criticizing their work or adjudicating their work. And so you have that process. And then in Alabama Repertory Dance Theater, we as faculty have sometimes critique each other's works. So we have an informal showing of the entire concert, and then we kind of go back amongst ourselves and kind of say, hey, you should think about this, or you should maybe think about taking your work in this particular direction, or something like that. And so it's a very collaborative process throughout both concerts in that regard, because we all certainly want to present the best work that we can present, and the way to do that is to certainly elicit outside support and criticism.
Yeah, I love the focus of collaboration that our dance program has.
Yeah.
And in kind of speaking with collaboration, dance is this kind of marriage of movement and sound, how those two meld together to create a story, or perhaps the absence of sound even. But could you talk a little, I mean, wouldn't want to claim that there's a set process, every choreographer does X, Y, and Z every time. Right. But what is kind of the process of how that marriage of music and movement begins? Where does that start? Music first or dance?
Well, it sort of kind of depends, and I'll speak from my perspective. Which I guess is probably a universal perspective. There's not many ways you can look at this, but the one thing that I do lately is that I've been inspired by music. I listen to a lot of music that's outside of what I would typically listen to kind of just expand my my listening ear and expand what I traditionally like to work with in terms of music. And so I usually will find a piece of music that speaks to me in a certain way. And sometimes I don't know what that way is. I just like the music. And then and it starts out as just a like of the music. Yeah. And then I have to develop a relationship with the music. And so what I typically do in my process is that I listen to the music over and over and over again. And then I write down adjectives that pretty much describe what I feel about the music. And what I think about the music, any images that come to mind when I listen to the music, and I journal all of those things down before I even go into the studio. Yeah. And then from that point, I'll take that list of words, and then I'll develop phrases, movement phrases that I feel like embody this list of terms. Yeah, yeah. And then from that, we have phrase work for the choreography. And then at that point, it's kind of just patching everything together, getting the dancers in the studio, and doing some dissecting of the choreography in that way. Other times I have a concept that derives first, like if there's something that I really want to choreograph about, and that's just been filtering around in my spirit, and I want to speak on it choreographically. So I'll begin to do the same process with writing down several words or images or feelings or emotions or whatever that come to mind, and then I'll create phrases with no music or anything, no musical score in the back of my head, just creating those phrases. And then after that, I'll try to find music going back through the same process that kind of speaks to to what I'm trying to do with the work. Yeah. But for me, it's usually music first, because it's, in this day and age, it's so difficult to find music. We're not always blessed with the composer who can come in and just create whatever we have in mind. But that's pretty much my approach lately.
Yeah. Right. And in watching a lot of the pieces, especially, I felt like in DA this semester, I saw students really telling very clear stories. Maybe more clear to me than in the past, that I felt like there was kind of an underlying passion in a lot of the students, that they were really telling a story that was very personal and intimate. Yes. So could you talk a little bit, as someone who does adjudicate and advise these students, what is that process like of telling that story? How does that develop, and what role do the different people play in that development?
Oh, a great question. One of the things that I think is kind of like the second process that I talked about, when students have, or choreographers have, an idea and they want to kind of just experiment around that idea, they begin to kind of like journal about what it is that they want to explore. And then out of that journaling, students typically kind of begin to create some phrases that they feel like match or captures the essence of their journaling. And then after that, they began to create phrases, and then maybe ask a faculty member to come in and like look at some of the phrase work. and offer some suggestions for improvement. And so it'll start there, and then the music sometimes comes either before or after the process. Sometimes students will find music that speaks to their choreographic concept or their theme, and then now they have a musical score to kind of base their movement off of before they even start creating work. So, but everyone has such an individual and different story to tell that from the outside perspective and criticizing that work, I often ask students before I even see their choreography, what is it that you're trying to capture? What is it that you're trying to illuminate? And what's your process for getting there? Because I think you have to start with that before you even get in the studio and start creating. Otherwise, you'll be creating something that has absolutely no relation to what you're actually trying to do, which oftentimes happens with younger choreographers. And as you pointed out, you've seen the students' work mature over time. It's because choreography is one of those things where it takes a lot of time for you to kind of finesse and finagle and look at your choreography from a very objective standpoint. One of the things I think choreographers do is that they create dances that feel good for them but are so removed from what they're trying to do thematically. And so that's where we as faculty come in and say, oh yeah, it feels good and looks good on you, but it has no relation to your conceptual approach. And it takes a while for students to do that, and I think by the time that they've gotten to their junior year, they've had the opportunity at that point to create 6 to 9 works at that point before their senior year, because we have 3 student concerts a year. So the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the more objective you become, and then your work gets more successful.
Well, and I love all the kind of parallels that I've drawn kind of in listening to this to theater, and this idea that you're always listening to music. We're always, told you got to be reading plays, you got to be reading scores and all of this. And then also this idea that you have to know what you're doing. I mean, when we go in directing class, the first thing you have to do is a proposal for the scene that you're going to do. Why are you telling this story here and now? So I love all the opportunities to be able to bridge those parallels. But going back to this idea of tone in the story that you're telling, I feel like a lot of times when I watch your pieces, there's the tone in the story that you're telling, and then my underlying tone is exhaustion. I am tired because you have these incredible pieces of movement that really are so athletic. So can you talk a little bit to the stamina of a dancer? We've talked a lot about kind of the conceptual and thematic elements, but about the sheer athleticism and the stamina.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned before, we all have our choreographic voices, and I've always been drawn to the athleticism of dance. Even when I started dancing when I was 10 years old, and I grew up with 3 brothers, and so we were all very athletic as kids. And so when I was introduced to ballet, I was not necessarily drawn with it, obviously at 10 years old and a boy, to the beauty of it, but I was more drawn to the athleticism of it. And so ever since then, I've always created works that kind of speak to my first love and my first passion, or what I was passionate of and drawn to dance for, and that's the athleticism of it. So most of my works are centered around that. Dancers who are in my work, I usually choose dancers who have taken my courses, because my courses are very similar to my work. They're very athletic, and it's very cardio intense, and so I usually choose students who have taken my classes because they already know what to expect prior to the process. But in terms of the overall athleticism of dancers, we train on an average probably 9 to 12 hours a week here at the university. That's not counting all the supplemental work that you do outside of class. But dancers do a whole plethora of things, from somatic practices like yoga and Pilates, and gyrotonics, gyrokinesis, pure bar, just a whole lot of extra things to supplement their technique training. And then the general stuff like going to the gym regularly. As dancers, we have to keep our bodies in optimum levels, and we only this is our instrument, and you only get one of them. So we're consistently trying to stay healthy by eating right and working out, and then all of those things really contribute to you as an overall performer, and your instrument is crafted based on all of the work you're doing outside of the studio. So that's our goal, is to just stay at optimum levels with our bodies. And it just kind of, and then over time, we rehearse these concerts about 5 to 8 weeks before we actually present them. And within the rehearsal process, you're constantly developing stamina for that work.
Great. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about the tone and the music and the process. But how would you now apply, because you did choreograph 2 pieces for this most recent ARDT, how would you apply that process to either of your pieces that you presented for you?
Sure. Well, the piece that I choreographed called Lean In was a very, it was one of those pieces like I talked about earlier, where I was drawn to the concept first and then the music second, and then I layered the music after I created the concept. With that piece, I wanted to do something that spoke to the relationship that I had with the seniors and the relationships that I felt that they had with each other. And so the piece is entitled Lean In, because it basically centers around knowing that no matter how far you shy away from your base support group, whether that's family, friends, a combination of both, that you can always lean back into them should you ever need them for emotional support, psychological support, or whatever. And so I thought it spoke to the relationship that I have with those students. These students came into the program with me when I came here 4 years ago. They were freshmen. I was a freshman. And so over the 4 years, we both have grown. I've grown pedagogically and artistically. They've grown artistically and technically. And so it's been a beautiful experience as we walk this experience together. And so I wanted to pay some homage to that relationship. And so again, we came into the studio. I created phrases around this idea of leaning in and weight support and weight shift and all of those things. And so we did a lot of contact improvisation to create some movement material. And then we just kind of built a lot of phrases around those ideas. And then later on, I layered the music on top of it to pretty much, I found music that I felt captured the essence of what we were trying to do with the choreography. And it kind of just came together quite nicely.
No, I would agree. I think it was very successful.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, this was wonderful. I'm glad we got to talk about these 2 really wonderful concerts and about the program.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kyle.
And thank you all for listening.